Hello, and here we are for a new smaller project using Tamiya's relatively new set of a German machine gun team to put into a small vignette. Back in 1988 they released a 7-man infantry set which many modelers would have used over the years, and 36 years later they produced a new 5-man team. So I've decided to build a small vignette to put them into using a wooden base to set it all off on. I used a similar base to put a Soviet T-34 on last year, and these bases are perfect for setting off small projects. I'll put a link to the UK website I got them from in the video notes. This base measures 20 centimeters by 15 centimeters, which is a good size for presenting these guys on. So opening up the box with the usual instruction sheets with the part numbers for the 5 figures. One is carrying 2 ammunition boxes, another one is kneeling firing his MP40, and a third with an MG42 on its bipod. Over the page is another figure firing an MG34 on the ground while another feeds the ammunition. There's also a number of decals for epaulettes, collar insignia, etc. There are 4 sprues altogether. The details of the uniforms are crisp and well moulded. The faces have clean, nicely defined features, and the uniforms, which I like, have little indentations for the gear to sit in, so they look and fit more natural and don't just hang off the figure. The set also comes with a small brick wall section which I might try and incorporate into the model somewhere. I decided however to use some resin heads for my guys, which would give a much better features and would be nicer to paint. As good as the uniform detail is, the hands I thought were a little disappointing and a bit clumpy with no definition. I love, however, as I mentioned, how the torsos and other parts all match up, so there's no mistaking how everything fits snugly together. So I decided to put the figures into some kind of factory setting, perhaps a little like the tractor factory in Stalingrad kind of vibe. I wanted to have a couple of building facades with 2 different building structures made from foam. I had some spare barrels and boxes to begin with to start adding some details. I think the new resin heads really help improve the figures. I only kept one original Tamiya head for the running guy. As a source of inspiration, I used Landscapes of War Volume 4 by Vallejo to give me some ideas of buildings and details. A really smart book with loads of techniques and ideas to use, including some industrial scenes which were perfect for this project. They had some nice pipeline details too, which is fortunately something that's available from Mini Art. And this is Mini Art's kit, kit number 35652. Inside the box there's 4 sprues which are all identical with connectors, valves, etc. Although for me pipes of different widths would have been nicer, give a bit more variation instead of them all being the same thickness. I started the brick wall by marking lines 25mm apart with a sharp pencil, then deepening them with the back of a scalpel. Vertical lines were then spaced 75mm apart. I used a small jagged stone to add some texture to the bricks, then finally another piece of foam was cut for the pipework. I used AK's excellent concrete paste to cover some of the structures, including the second building. I marked and cut some grooves into some small foam pieces for the pipe supports using a hot wire. The Mini Art pipework offers some great variations on design, but as I mentioned, perhaps it would be nicer if there was some different sized pipes available. groundwork is simply plaster, dry plaster mixed with water, using various elements such as sand, small stones and bits of grass to vary the look of it. A mix of white glue and water was painted over the still wet plaster in sections, adding the various elements whilst everything was still wet and pressing it down to embed it all in. Once done, I just gave everything a coat of hairspray to help it even more, to keep everything in place, and finally gave everything a quick prime to begin the painting process, including a number of the accessories, which will help with the final details and including some of the weapons too. I began painting the brick wall as usual, all in one colour, and then just started picking out individual bricks. Next, for the grouts, I covered the bricks with some ready-made wall plaster. I'd seen another modeller using AK's dark sepia pin wash on figures' uniforms, and so I thought I'd get some to try it out in future, but for now I'm using it over the white grouts. I made a little fuse box out of plastic card and had this set to use for a small sign. I had some corrugated cardboard to create a roof on the brick building once all the plastic edging was done around the back. I then found a larger piece of tube which I could use as a pipe between the two buildings, and once this was painted I used some chipping fluid to add some further wear to it. Looking through some old decals from other kits from the past, I used some of these again to add some further details. For the second roof, I just needed a small piece made using some plastic cards, and then added some nuts and bolts from a set from Maine. For the dirt track, I diluted some acrylic paints heavily with water and then just brushed it over the ground in sections, blending the colours while they were still wet to try and make it all look a bit natural, adding a little green to the corner where the pipes will be. I used enamel filters and oils on the corrugated iron roof, and I like the idea of having a slightly different colour to the middle section, just again to add some variation. As happy as I was with the roofs, I still wasn't really 100% happy with the appearance of the right hand building, so I sponged on Vallejo's cement colour over the grey and over the number 7, which I thought looked a bit too distracting and didn't really blend in with the overall setting of the scene. I chipped the two pipes using the hairspray method after airbrushing a top light coat of light grey, adding some random spare decals to help with the detailing, and then gave everything a light wash of oils and enamels. I used a few products I had spare from Diorama Precept, an Italian company, to add some vegetation to the lower corner. They've got some excellent products on their website, and I'll put a link again in the notes below. Next, I applied some more oils and white spirit to the concrete parts, just to add a little more dust and dirt, and then finally some grime to the upper section. Next, I needed to add some resin. In past projects I've always used Envirotex Light for resin work, but since I wasn't able to get any for this, I tried a slightly different product from Amazon, the usual 2 parts resin and hardener, and this worked just the same. I just needed a little for the puddles, but it really did the job. Finally, onto the figures. After priming them all in a light grey, I didn't want the figure uniforms to look quite so uniform, so I used a few shades of field grey to paint the tunics and trousers. The same thing too for the equipment, like the water bottles, slightly different shades for some of them, as they obviously wouldn't have all been identical. Once all the acrylic painting was done, I used some very light oil washes just on the faces and on some of the equipment to pick out some of the details. Since the decals were included in a box, I thought I would use them since they were there and this was supposed to be a bit of a kit review. They were easy enough to apply to each figure, but the decals, they still had a little edge to them once they were off the paper, which needed removing. Once on the figure, they still looked a little unnatural and maybe even toy-like, but I liked the use of some acrylic paint I thought would give them a better appearance. I was kindly sent some black magic metal from Getz Miniatures to try out, and this proved great to use for the gunslings. Easy to cut and use and shape and even paint. The thin metal works perfectly. It can be used in all sorts of projects such as flags and blankets, even damaged vehicle parts and straps, and I'll put a link to it in the notes below.